Hello there, my name is Mooseman, and today I'm here to inform you of whether you should play, wait, or avoid the action-adventure game Jotun. As always, we will be looking at gameplay, aesthetics, value, and future potential before making a final verdict on the release version of Jotun. Jotun is an action-adventure game with hand-drawn graphics in which you play the fallen Viking Thora, who has been killed at sea and must prove to the gods that she is worthy to enter Valhalla, even though she died a dishonorable death. You will have to travel between the dimensions of Viking Purgatory to hunt down the Jotun, who are mythological giants that wield the power of the elements. Jotun is separated into two main segments, exploration and combat. The game's combat system is pretty simple from the perspective of your character. You can perform a light and heavy slash, dodge, and activate abilities. But where the difficulty and depth come into play is when you face the Jotun in combat. Each Jotun has an extremely unique moveset that requires you to have a high degree of technical skill to survive, and you will likely die multiple times before figuring out what the best strategy is or where the Jotun's hidden weakness is. Jotun's combat is extremely brutal, so while you could theoretically finish the game without grabbing a single upgrade, the chances of you being able to do so are slim to none. Each attack takes out a massive chunk of your health bar, so being able to dodge and block using abilities is required for taking on some of the harder Jotun. As someone who is always looking for games that challenge gamers to their limits, Jotun is definitely a game that impressed me with its difficulty. Not having seen anything outside of the launch trailer before going into the game, I was pleasantly surprised at the level of challenge that the game provided. Each attack by a Jotun is set up to give you the absolute minimum amount of time to react. This will result in you having to plan ahead to be in a position to avoid any of the various moves that the Jotun could execute. Each Jotun have multiple stages of combat, which allows their moves to change along with the battle. The first two stages are usually an introduction to the abilities of the Jotun. During this stage, the abilities won't usually combo and are very easy to dodge. Once you get the Jotun to 50% health, however, they enter the stage 3, which causes all of the Jotun's abilities to level up immensely. At 50% health, even if you know what the abilities are, they are often accompanied by extra range or additional obstacles that make them impossible to dodge without planning ahead. So let's talk about your abilities and the exploration in Jotun. While fighting Jotun may be the meat of the gameplay, you will also have to explore to find runes and special abilities before you can fight them. How much you explore will determine how powerful you become, as special abilities are not outright given to you, rather you will have to find them hidden in each environment. The special abilities include healing, shield, clone, boost, and damage boost. These abilities can be found multiple times throughout the game, so missing one early on will not be a huge hindrance to your ability to defeat the bosses. You are, however, rewarded for finding multiple of the same ability by getting additional uses of that ability, which is especially helpful if you find yourself needing more than 2 uses of each ability on certain Jotun. You can also find health bar increases throughout the levels in the form of golden apples. While your basic character mechanics stay the same throughout the levels themselves have unique mechanics that add more depth to the game. The mechanics in these levels often mirror one or more of the techniques the Jotun have, so the practice you get in an adventure portion dodging certain attacks from the environment will help you in the actual Jotun fights. Oftentimes games claim to be exploration based, but with no real incentive to actually explore. Jotun is a game that successfully gives meaning to exploration while still allowing players to skip anything that they deem unnecessary. At the end of the game, I had gained all the powers and multiple charges of a few of the different abilities with a basic degree of exploration. While I didn't find every single upgrade in the game, I definitely spent more time exploring than I probably would have if the game didn't reward me with such essential power boosts. In a way, the game plays a bit like an RPG without a leveling system. Instead of grinding out experience if you are having trouble with a boss, you can do some more exploration in hopes of finding additional abilities. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Jotun, but I would like to criticize one thing about the combat, and that's Thora's movement. When fighting the Jotun, it becomes immediately apparent that the primary reason that you will take damage is because Thora is just way too slow. The dodge helps a tiny bit, but after you roll you come to a complete stop, which leaves you open for the next attack. This makes using the dodge quite a liability, and you only really want to use it if you are completely out of position. While I understand the intention of making her slower as a consequence of carrying a giant axe, experimenting with giving her just a little bit more speed may make the game more accessible. The final point on gameplay I would like to make is that the game plays with 8 set directions. What this means is that the characters aim in the north, northeast, east, southeast, and so on directions instead of having a full 360-degree range of movement. While this negatively affects some of the aesthetic of the game, especially watching your character model jerk between multiple directions, it did make it easier to predict where the abilities of your enemies were going to hit, and also allowed you to have more control over your aim. This fixed directional gameplay also makes this game more accessible for keyboard users, since you don't need the complete range of motion that usually only a controller provides. The aesthetics are one of the main unique features of the game, and also one of the primary selling points of Jotun, so we will spend a bit more time than usual talking about them. Like I mentioned earlier, Jotun's graphics are hand-drawn, which gives a more cartoon-like look to the game than you would expect. While playing the game, the aesthetic reminded me of the Disney cartoon Hercules, but with a Viking influence instead of a Greek influence. The strength of this style of graphics is that they are amazingly beautiful and allow for a greater degree of expression than other games. Each time I encountered a new Jotun, I was surprised by how much depth you could see in their expression in comparison to other traditional graphical styles. While none of the Jotun spoke, simply watching their movements and expressions gave me a clear idea of what their personality could be like, which actually helped me predict their moves a little more efficiently. One thing I did notice was the difference in detail between your character, the environment, and the Jotun. Your character has a noticeably crisper look to her than everything else in the world. The environment has a more painted look to it, and the Jotun have a rough, sketched look to them. While this may or may not be an aesthetic choice by the developers, it is somewhat noticeable, and while I personally like this design choice, it does seem a tad disjointed at times. While the game is not extremely long, the developers obviously took a huge amount of time to make a surprising variety of environments to show off this unique graphical style. Each explorational area presented me with a brand new environment, and thus showed off new ways that their aesthetic choice had been utilized, ranging from forests to volcanoes to snowlands to the clouds above. The Norse mythology used in Jotun is not merely there for the sake of having a cool theme, but rather it was used heavily throughout the game. The game was entirely narrated in authentic Icelandic, which is extremely similar to Old Norse. Each world that you visited was part of and included Norse mythology, and every enemy was part of that mythology. The game's narration did a great job of explaining and pointing out each instance of mythology, which helped further to immerse me into the game and learn of the history. The game is priced at $15 with a 10% off launch day discount. The story mode's length is about 5 to 7 hours, which is decent for the price. However, I would like to say those 5 to 7 hours were filled with a huge amount of new mechanics, challenge, and Viking lore that increased the value for me immensely. While Jotun is an extremely beautiful and fun game for those who enjoy action-adventure games, the replayability is very low. Once you learn the mechanics behind the bosses and the secrets in the worlds, there really isn't anything left to warrant playing through a second time. While I don't think Jotun necessarily needs anything in particular, I truly hope that more games get created in this art style due to Jotun proving that it can be done. While I won't spoil the story, the game has a complete ending that makes it apparent that no sequels are planned as of yet, so it may be up to others to attempt this art style in a game again. There were, however, other goals in the Kickstarter that did not get met, so there is the possibility of releasing them as DLC in the future if the game is successful. Jotun is a game with a truly unique aesthetic that perfectly exemplifies video games as an art form. While I've always considered video games to be a form of art, Jotun is probably the best example of creating a game that has a cinematic feel without sacrificing the gameplay to achieve that goal. The glorious landscapes, the brutal combat, the in-depth Norse mythology, and of course the Jotun themselves come together to create a game that is both beautiful and fun if you enjoy a bit of a challenge. While the game is too difficult for me to recommend to everyone, if you are familiar with any of the Dark Souls or Demon Souls games and enjoy that level and style of combat, then I recommend that you play Jotun. If you aren't looking to rip your hair out but still want to experience Jotun, watching a playthrough of the game just to see the unique style will still impress you all the same. Thank you for watching my play, wait or avoid review of Jotun. If you would like to buy the game, a link to the Steam store page is in the description below. And if you would like to see more of my content, Subscribe and check out my channel where I do reviews, news, and other gaming commentary, such as my review of Extreme Exorcism, a 2D take on the Call of Duty zombie-style survival genre, or my review of Super Mario Maker, a Mario platformer that allows you to create and share levels in a variety of classic Super Mario Bros. Styles.